I could not tell you what Esther did. If you said, call Esther and ask her about, I wouldn't even have her number.
On screen, the mother Florida Evans, warm, resilient, a symbol of an entire generation. Yet in real life, Esther Rolle was silent, proud, and filled with secrets. Those secrets were not trivial. They were hidden conflicts, creative battles, accusations that shook the backstage. For decades, audiences saw only the smile, but behind it was the shadow, was the truth that could shatter the perfect image. Now the curtain has been torn apart. What Rolle kept hidden has finally come to light. The question is, what secret could be powerful enough to shake Hollywood and send shivers through her fans? The greatest secret, the simmering feud with Jimmy Walker. In 1974, Good Times aired on American television and quickly became a cultural phenomenon. It was the first sitcom to portray a working-class black family in Chicago with all the struggles, joys, and optimism that allowed audiences to see themselves reflected. At the center of it all, Esther Rolle, as the mother Florida Evans, shone as the soul of the show. She was the pillar, the embodiment of dignity, while beside her stood Jimmy Walker, the young man who played J.J. Evans with his catchphrase "Dynamite" that had America laughing out loud. On screen, they seemed like real mother and son. Every glance, every exchange, every moment of laughter and tears convinced viewers that the bond surpassed the set itself. But it was only an illusion. In reality, Esther Rolle and Jimmy Walker were nothing like the connection fans imagined. It took nearly half a century for the truth to be revealed when Walker himself made a chillingly blunt confession. "We were never friends. We never spoke. Only on set. I didn't even have her phone number." A shock. A brutal truth. An entire generation of viewers who believed in the Evans family's warmth suddenly had to confront a void that motherly love existed only on screen. Off-screen between Rolle and Walker was an icy silence. No conversations. No sharing. No closeness. Only professionalism. That distance lasted not just for a few years, but throughout the entire decade. Good Times aired from 1974 to 1979, and it did not end when the series concluded. When Esther Rolle passed away in 1998 at the age of 78 from diabetes complications, Walker did not attend the funeral. That absence only fueled fierce speculation. Was the gap between them an irreparable rift, a hidden feud that was never resolved? To understand the roots of this secret, one must look at the clash of ideals between the two. Esther Rolle, born in 1920, grew up in Florida as one of 18 siblings, and from an early age, she saw art as a mission. She only accepted the role of Florida Evans after being assured the character would have a strong husband, a rarity on American television at the time, to accurately portray the black family. For her, Good Times was not mere entertainment, but a social mirror. She wanted Florida to embody pride, dignity, and strength. Meanwhile, Jimmy Walker entered acting as a chance to change his life. Born in 1947 in the Bronx, he had worked as a CBS technician before turning to stand-up comedy. The role of J.J. Evans made him a star after just one season. But the cost was high. J.J. quickly became a caricature with an exaggerated afro, over-the-top mannerisms, and foolish catchphrases. Audiences laughed, ratings soared, but to Esther Rolle, J.J. had been twisted into a dangerous stereotype. A lazy young man with no job, no education. The opposite of the show's intended message. That was the dividing line. Rolle despised the way Hollywood exploited J.J. for laughs, while Walker simply accepted it because for him, it was survival. One side fought for artistic integrity. The other stayed silent to preserve his career, and so that difference froze their relationship. Walker admitted he and Rolle never shared a meal, never spoke off camera. Everything stopped at work. For audiences, this was almost impossible to believe. On screen, they were inseparable, mother and son. Yet that very contrast made the truth even more painful. It was all a script, all a performance. Looking back, Walker did not deny the pressure he carried. He knew many black viewers saw J.J. as a betrayal, and he himself never earned respect in the community. People didn't want Jimmy, they wanted J.J. "I was a product, and I knew it," he bitterly admitted. As for Rolle, she held firmly to her principles to the point of abandoning the spotlight, walking away from Good Times in 1977 because she refused to accept the distortion of the script. The hidden conflict with the writers and Hollywood. The cold relationship with Jimmy Walker was only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lay an even harsher battle, a battle with Hollywood itself. There, Esther Rolle was not just facing a co-star, but an entire creative machine ready to crush ideals in exchange for laughter and massive ratings. And when the comedic veneer was stripped away, the truth stood bare. Good Times was not always a source of pride. In Rolle's eyes, at times, it was a betrayal. From the very beginning, Rolle set an unshakable condition: she would only accept the role of Florida Evans if the character and her family were portrayed with authenticity and dignity. She would not tolerate the cheap caricatures that had saturated American screens throughout the 1960s. To Rolle, this was more than a role. It was a chance for television to challenge decades of prejudice against black people. But in Hollywood, ideals often collided with ratings. The writers and producers, most of them white men, saw Good Times through a different lens. They wanted maximum laughs. They wanted JJ to become the comic centerpiece, a flamboyant character, the sillier the better, because that was the quickest formula to keep audiences glued to their screens every Thursday night. This clash soon turned into heated conflict. Rolle called the transformation of JJ into a clown, a blatant betrayal. To her, every cheap laugh was a stab at her community's dignity. She openly criticized the writers in script meetings, accusing them of being truly cruel for exploiting stereotypes for entertainment. More than once, Rolle refused to read lines if she felt they demeaned her character or distorted the image of black people. Behind the curtain, tensions escalated. While audiences heard waves of laughter, the set of Good Times was a silent battlefield. John Amos, who played James Evans Sr., repeatedly sided with Rolle, saying the show was straying from its original purpose. His bluntness cost him his role after the third season. Amos later recalled bitterly, "They didn't want us to tell the truth. They just wanted us to dance to their tune." Rolle, with her unwavering nature, would not back down. She believed television had a responsibility to reflect social reality. Working-class families struggling with poverty, racism, and unemployment. But instead of highlighting those issues, the writers reduced JJ to a foolish young man whose only role was to shout dynamite for cheap laughs. To Rolle, this was an insult. She saw JJ as a product of a commercial machine, while she wanted Good Times to serve as a platform representing the black community. Rolle's public criticism once sent ripples through Hollywood. Some colleagues said she was over-dramatizing an entertainment show. But the truth was that Rolle saw further than anyone. She knew millions of black viewers were watching, hoping to see themselves portrayed with respect. She understood that every scene, every line could either reinforce or destroy her community's image in American society. And she was determined not to let her reputation be used to sustain stereotypes. The story became even more shocking when Rolle openly accused the creative team in interviews, using the word cruel to describe how they handled JJ. This was not a mild disagreement, but a heavy indictment from a star against the very team behind the show. That was why her relationship with Walker, though not personal hatred, could never be close, because JJ symbolized the compromise she despised. The audience never knew. They saw only a funny sitcom with some episodes drawing ratings of over 20 million viewers. Staggering numbers in the 1970s. They laughed at JJ, unaware that every laugh felt like a knife in Esther Rolle's heart. She fought every day to preserve the soul of Good Times. And the painful truth was that in this battle, she gradually became isolated. What made this secret even heavier was its meaning. For Rolle, Good Times was never just a commercial product. It was a cultural statement. It was a way for black people to see themselves on screen without mockery. And when Hollywood chose laughter over truth, she saw it as a betrayal, not just of her, but of the community the show was meant to represent. That is why the creative conflict did not only poison the backstage atmosphere, but also raised questions about the very nature of American television. At the time, whom did it serve? And for what purpose? Esther Rolle carried this pain in silence, because she knew audiences loved the show, loved the character Florida Evans. But deep down, she always knew Good Times had lost its chance to become a cultural masterpiece. All for the sake of ratings. The courageous act of walking away. The silent battles with writers and producers had pushed Esther Rolle to a breaking point. With each passing episode, Good Times drifted further from the mission she had once believed in. And then, in 1977, silence was no longer an option. Rolle struck with a decisive move. She walked away from the show at the height of its success, leaving Hollywood stunned. This was not a minor disagreement, not a fleeting burst of anger. Rolle's decision came from her core principles. She declared outright that she would not sign a new contract unless she was given creative control, at least in shaping how the characters and stories represented black people on television. Hollywood might have seen Good Times as a money-making machine, but for Rolle, it had to be the voice of the community. When that demand was ignored, she chose to leave. The act left many astonished. Who would walk away from a lucrative job from a role that had made her a national figure only to embrace silence? But for Rolle, it was not abandonment, it was a statement. She wanted the world to see the creative collapse of Good Times, a show that once carried a noble mission but had been twisted into shallow comedy. She was willing to sacrifice fame and steady income to uphold her principle: art must not betray the community it represents. Her departure left a gaping void. Good Times lost its soul. Without Florida Evans, the Evans family suddenly had no anchor. Audiences felt a sense of emptiness and ratings plummeted. Later seasons struggled to stay afloat, but could never reclaim their former glory. Just as Rolle predicted, without her, the show became a faded shadow of itself. The striking part is that for years, viewers never fully understood the true reason. Many believed Rolle left because of personal conflicts, clashes with co-stars or the crew. But the greater secret was this: she sacrificed everything not for ego, but for artistic values. She would not allow the image of black people to be traded for cheap laughs. For Rolle, leaving was the only way to preserve the dignity of Florida and of the entire community. The price was steep. Rolle lost an iconic role at its peak. She stood outside the spotlight watching Good Times continue without its heart. Yet that very choice solidified her legacy. She became a living testament to artistic integrity, someone who dared to place principle above ambition. And that was the secret most fans never understood. Esther Rolle did not leave out of anger, nor out of a hunger for power. She left to protect the truth, to remind Hollywood that laughter must never be built on the distortion of a community. Her departure in 1977 was not only a turning point in her career, but also an artistic declaration. It transformed Esther Rolle from a sitcom star into a cultural warrior, a woman who dared to risk everything to safeguard dignity for herself and for the millions of black viewers who followed her every step. Esther Rolle never compromised. To understand why Esther Rolle could firmly walk away from Good Times at its peak, one must look back at the artistic path she had followed. Unlike many actors who accepted any role just to gain a foothold, Rolle from the very beginning set herself a principle never to compromise with roles that damaged the dignity of black people. Born into a large family in Pompano Beach, Florida, Rolle was the 10th of 18 siblings. A poor childhood did not stop her from nurturing her artistic aspirations. After graduating, she joined the Negro Ensemble Company, one of New York's pioneering theater groups for black artists. It was there that Rolle asserted her artistic identity. She accepted only roles that truthfully reflected society, exposed injustice, and gave depth to black characters on stage. In the 1960s, when Hollywood and Broadway were still saturated with stereotypical roles, from silent servants to meaningless slaves, Esther Rolle firmly refused. She once told friends, "I would rather have no role at all than accept one that makes me ashamed to look in the mirror." That firmness made her career path more difficult, but it also built her unique reputation, an actress who would never sell out her principles. The turning point came when Rolle appeared in Maude 1972, the famous sitcom produced by Norman Lear. At first, her character, Florida Evans, was merely the maid in the Findlay household. For many black actors at the time, this was already a golden opportunity. But Rolle was not satisfied. She did not want Florida to remain a shadow, a supporting role for comic relief. And at that moment, she made an unexpected demand: if her character had a family, then that family must have a strong, decent father so that audiences could see a truthful image of black men. That condition may have seemed small, but it changed the history of American television. It laid the foundation for Good Times, a show built around the Evans family, the first black family to appear in primetime television with both a mother and a father. Without Rolle's determination, Good Times might have remained only a faint offshoot of Maude, and the image of black families would have continued to be distorted by outdated stereotypes. What audiences never knew, and what was the great secret behind her role choices, was that Rolle used her position to force Hollywood to change. She did not shout loudly, did not wage media campaigns, but she was firm in backstage negotiations. Every condition she set, every script she rejected, was a brick in building a new image of black people on television. For decades, Hollywood was notorious for exploiting stereotypes to attract viewers. Slave roles, servant roles, comic relief roles. These were the gateways black actors were forced to pass through for a chance. But Esther Rolle chose the opposite path. She was willing to risk being sidelined to preserve a worthy image for herself and her community. And it was that persistence that made audiences see Florida Evans not as a fictional mother, but as the embodiment of millions of real black mothers, strong, resilient, yet full of love. The shocking truth is that most of the public never realized how hard Rolle had to fight for those roles. They only saw the final result, a vivid, authentic character. But few knew that for such a character to appear on screen, Rolle had to reject countless tempting but stereotypical offers. Each rejection meant sacrificing career opportunities, and each acceptance came with the assurance that the character had depth and conveyed respect for the community. Even after Good Times, this principle continued to guide Rolle. She starred in Summer of My German Soldier 1978, a role that earned her an Emmy, because the character was a black woman of influence in a story rich with themes of war and prejudice. When she appeared in Driving Miss Daisy 1989, she chose the role for the same reason, to show that black characters were not merely shadows beside white figures, but real people with thoughts, feelings, and their own history. Looking back, the secret behind Esther Rolle's role choices was not luck or chance. It was the outcome of decades of consistency, with one principle: never to compromise with Hollywood's distortions. She used her position, as a black actress in a time of great barriers, to challenge the entertainment machine. And by doing so, she paved the way for future generations, from Felicia Rashad in The Cosby Show to Viola Davis on the big screen, to walk confidently knowing they did not have to accept demeaning roles. This is something ordinary fans rarely knew. They remember Florida Evans, remember the line filled with maternal grief. Damn, 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 when her husband James died on the show. But they did not see the quiet determination behind it. An Esther Rolle who never compromised, never bowed to stereotypical scripts. And it was thanks to those decisions that she forever changed how television portrayed black people. From caricatures into real human beings with all their pain, joy, and dignity. Esther Rolle never left behind noisy memoirs, nor boasted about her backstage battles. She let her characters speak for her, and the secret she carried for decades was something few viewers ever realized: through silent but steadfast choices, she changed an entire industry. An actress may be forgotten with time, but the principles she built will echo forever in every black role that appears on screen afterward. The secret of her return and the price she paid. In 1977, Esther Rolle left Good Times to the shock of audiences. No one thought the mother Florida Evans, the heart of the show, could disappear over creative principles. But Rolle did just that. She walked away to protect the dignity of her character and expose the decline of the script. It seemed like the end of her ties with Good Times. Yet a year later, audiences were stunned to see her back. And her return carried another secret one few people knew. The final season of Good Times aired in 1978. By then, the show had lost much of its appeal. Rolle's absence had shaken the audience's trust, and ratings kept plunging. The producers were forced to find a way to salvage it. They knew there was only one solution: bring Florida Evans back. So Esther Rolle was invited to return. But she did not come back empty-handed. She set clear conditions: if she signed again, she had to be given more creative control, at least in shaping the character and guiding the storylines. This was a strategic move. Rolle knew all too well that Good Times was already in decline. She knew its collapse could not be reversed. Yet she agreed to return. Why? Not for fame, and certainly not for money. The secret was, this role came back to protect her legacy. Florida Evans was a symbol she had built with everything she had. If the show ended without her, that character would vanish in distortion. Rolle was determined to return to set Florida back on course, so that black audiences could see one last time a worthy image on their television screens. Rolle's return was like trying to rescue a ship with a hole in its hull. She entered the final season with her usual firmness, forcing the writers to adjust certain details and keeping Florida at the center instead of a background figure. But the cracks were too deep, and the show could not be revived. Ratings continued to drop, and audience reactions were no longer the same. Good Times ended after its 6th season, carrying away both its glory and its controversies. What ordinary audiences never knew was this: Rolle's return was not an act of selfishness. On the contrary, it was a strategic compromise. She knew the show was nearing its end, but at least in those final episodes, she could preserve the soul of Florida, leaving black audiences with a figure they could still take pride in. She accepted the price of returning to a sinking ship, accepted tying her name to a faded season, only to ensure the character was not completely distorted. That price was not small. When the show ended, Rolle did not receive roaring applause. There was no praise that she had saved the program. Instead, she quietly stepped away, leaving audiences with a Florida Evans who remained strong and resilient to the very end. That was the true victory. Rolle had sacrificed personal glory to preserve the image of a cultural icon. The secret of her return only becomes weighty in hindsight. Esther Rolle did not come back to chase the spotlight, but to shield her legacy from being tainted. And when Good Times finally closed its curtain, audiences might have felt regret, even disappointment. But one image remained in memory exactly as Rolle intended: Florida Evans, a real black mother, strong, resilient, and dignified. An image not completely swallowed by Hollywood's commercial machine. Esther Rolle. When the lights went out, only the guardian of dignity remained. The secrets behind the scenes of Good Times revealed that Esther Rolle was not just an actress, but a woman steadfast in defending dignity. Yet to fully understand her legacy, one must look further at her life before television, her artistic choices after leaving the show, and finally the lessons that echoed after her death. It is there that we see the complete portrait of an artist who spent her life as a cultural gatekeeper. Esther Rolle was born in 1920 in Pompano Beach, Florida, into a farming family with 18 children. A poor upbringing forced her to develop discipline and resilience early. But instead of accepting fate, Rolle chose the path of knowledge. She studied at Spelman College, Hunter College, and the Yale School of Drama, places that not only trained her craft, but also awakened in her a sense of the social responsibility of art. From the stage, Rolle had already affirmed her stance. In Jean Genet's The Blacks or Arthur Miller's The Crucible, she accepted only roles that depicted the pain and pride of black people. Audiences saw in Rolle a different presence, one that refused ease, one that did not turn art into cheap entertainment. These roles laid the foundation for the creative ideals she would later fiercely defend when she entered television. When Good Times ended, many thought Rolle would never escape the shadow of Florida Evans. But she proved otherwise. In 1979, Rolle won an Emmy for Summer of My German Soldier, a resounding victory that showed she did not need to cling to the past to shine. She went on to star in Driving Miss Daisy 1989 and How to Make an American Quilt. 1995, keeping her principle of only choosing roles with artistic and social value. Each new role was a declaration black people did not exist merely to provoke laughter. They were central characters in great stories. Few knew that alongside her career, Rolle quietly campaigned to change how Hollywood portrayed black people. She supported independent theater groups, spoke at cultural forums, and encouraged young black writers and directors. Rolle never made noise about these efforts, but colleagues and attentive audiences recognized she was slowly shaping lasting change in American media. Then, in 1998, Rolle died at the age of 78 from complications of diabetes. Her funeral gathered many colleagues' faces who had stood with her on stage and television. They came to farewell the mother of Good Times and a cultural icon. Yet in that gathering, the public could not help but notice an absence. Jimmy Walker, the one who had once called Rolle his television mother, did not appear. His absence was like a wound never healed, leaving a quiet question about their relationship, a secret that followed Rolle to the grave. Rolle's death did not only close the life of an actress, but also marked the end of an era. She left audiences with many roles, but more importantly, she left a living lesson: a true artist must steadfastly defend artistic integrity, even at the cost of career. Florida Evans will forever be remembered, but Rolle's legacy went far beyond. She embodied the image of a black woman who dared to stand against Hollywood's machinery to preserve dignity for her community. Looking back at her entire journey from a poor childhood to her final days, Esther Rolle's greatest secret did not lie in conflicts or coldness toward colleagues. It lay in her absolute consistency, for her art was never a game, but a responsibility. And through that spirit, Rolle became the guardian of dignity, a role written in no script but the greatest role of her life. What do you think about Esther Rolle, an artist who was willing to risk her entire career to defend dignity? Leave your comment below and share your thoughts so we can continue the discussion. And don't forget to share this video with your friends, because who knows, they might also need the inspiration from the story of a true guardian of dignity.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.